Welcome back to another episode of Faces of Our Cities. My name is Jesse. Today we're going to be talking with Niccolo Barber. Now, Nico and I went to high school together. We went to this little boarding school in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. And without getting into too much of it, this was a pretty conservative Christian high school where, we had chapel every single day and we had study hall. We didn't have uniforms, thank goodness, because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I never would have made it through with uniforms. I would have gotten sent back to the room every day for a messy uniform. Yeah. You were a better dressed than I was, though, so maybe you would have taken care of that. But we met back when we were 14 years old. You were coming from California?
Utah. Living in Utah.
Utah. You came from Utah, and I was coming from Japan. And so right. It was just this crazy place in the middle of Wisconsin where these kids from all over the country and the world were coming together. And we hung out there for more or less 4 years. And then after high school, we pretty much went our separate ways. We were talking about this just before this, that we really didn't we weren't in the close friend group. We were in that outer friend group. And so I remember thinking that would probably be one of the last times I ever saw you, just because we were going separate routes and we were never like BFFs in that sense, mostly because I only had one BFF or two BFFs. I better be careful. Phil Starr might listen to this, and Timmy Knight, right? Yeah. We moved on, and then the last time I saw you was again in Portland, Oregon. Maybe 4 years ago now. And yeah, I was I think it was about 4 years ago, because I was traveling through the country working on a documentary, and I ran into your sister in Montana or something like that. Very random. It was one of these. It's just, I guess that's part of the world when you belong to a church body or have family members that belong to a larger church body. You end up traveling through the country and meeting these people, and my sisters have made their impression on the Christian church that we're part of, right? So I walk into a church and they're like, "Oh, you must be a Hieb. You look just like one of your sisters," and then they name one of my sisters off, right? Yeah. And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I do. I know." And but that's how it ended up working out. And your sister was like, "Yeah, he goes in Portland," and I was like, "Oh, I'm headed there." And we got brunch, and that was the last time we talked, and it was such a weird experience.
It was so random, yeah. I remember when she texted me about that. I was so excited to see you, and because like you said, it was kind of one of those things. Just always enjoyed hanging out with you when we did in high school, but it was didn't expect to get the opportunity to do that again. So glad we're able to reconnect.
Me too. I want to share this one memory I have with you, and if after this I share this, you're like, "Don't ever let that go live. You can take it out." Or you can tell me to take it out. But one of my fondest memories with you, Nico, was that our senior year of high school, during the homecoming, we planned this homecoming thing in the auditorium. Right. And so I wasn't playing football, you weren't playing football, we were just kind of whatever, a group of rebels. We also used to be in that Phoenix line where we would take off our shirts during football games and write our mascot's letter on our chest. I have a picture and you're in it. And so I know you can't deny it. I someplace in Wisconsin, it's hiding in a storage unit.
In the freezing cold Wisconsin falls. And
yeah, and what I remember is, we had this idea that we were going to swing from the rafters in the auditorium onto stage during Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. And you can tell me if my memory's off, but I'm like, no, I'm actually
right.
really positive this happened. And we had like the timpanis.
Yeah, we're banging like, on the timpanis, and then like all the football players came in. Like, didn't they rappel down from the rafters after that and joined us on stage?
They did. So they rappelled, but you and I swung in from the sides on ropes. And I remember almost hating you. And I remember thinking, I can't believe we got them to let us do this. But you were the reason that we got it approved. Because we went to the dean's house, if I remember, like the day before. And we were like, we got this idea and it's going to be amazing. And I was not a good student. I was not to be trusted whatsoever. And so he just like looked at me and was like, yeah, what's Nico gonna say? Like, should I don't trust you, Jesse, at all, but Nico, like, what's up? And you were like, oh yeah, no, I rock climb and like I totally know how to do this. It's definitely safe. I've already got it figured out. And I was like, yeah, he's got it.
Which wasn't true at all. Just like, I got a rope I'm going to tie up.
And we were like, I think maybe we tested it out one time. I don't even know if we did because I was so terrified.
But it went off flawlessly.
I'm glad that you say that because in my head, I kind of think it was a lot more amazing than I give it credit for.
No, I've thought about. I wish it was like the days when people had cell phones and were getting videos. I would love a video of that because it was pretty.
Thank you. I think so too.
Yeah, pretty daring that we did it.
I've never heard of anyone trying that. So, one of my favorite memories from high school with you was that whole experience and how cool it was. We were such rebels.
Yeah.
So
planning
anyway, well, let's now that like our audience is totally bored by us reminiscing about our high school and our experiences there. Why can you give me and our audience a breakdown of what happened after high school? Like, and you don't have to go into like all the details, but essentially, like, I mean, you went and became a lawyer, right?
Yeah. So after high school, went to college, majored in political science, which like every lawyer does, and took a year off, and after that, did a fellowship out in DC and stayed out there for law school, kind of knowing that I wanted to come back to the West Coast eventually, but for a little political junkie fresh out of college, that was kind of, the mecca to go work and go to law school there. So, did that, graduated in, 2013, which now was making me feel really old. So I've been practicing for about 8.5 years now.
And what kind of law have you been practicing? Because when I look at your LinkedIn, it seems, am I right in thinking mostly corporate law?
Yeah, corporate law. So I went into private practice at a firm called Sidley Austin initially in their Los Angeles office, in their corporate group, and that's just kind of a, you say corporate law, there's a lot of different facets of that, but I've kind of touched a number of things throughout a corporation's life, whether it's, forming and helping startup companies form their entities, form their corporations, raise capital from venture capital funds, to public company mergers, to initial public offerings. Most of my focus is on the mergers and acquisition side of things. So, if it's a tech company, I practice in California, I should preface this. So, everybody is a tech company out here, it seems like. So, I do a lot of work.
You have to be if you want to ever get bought out,
Yeah, exactly. So
no one's buying bakeries out.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of money flowing into these tech companies. So I do a lot of work in tech, primarily on the venture capital side. So when they're investing in tech startups, I'll help with those investment documents, help the venture capital funds form their funds, raise money for their funds, and do due diligence on companies. And then I also, so that's probably about 50% of my practice is on the investment fund side. And then the other part of my practice is in mergers and acquisitions. And that, for California, it tends to be a lot of sell side, companies that are selling to get liquidity for their founders and their venture capital backers, but sometimes on the buy side as well.
You had mentioned that you're mostly virtual or completely virtual right now. I'm just kind of curious how that has just changed the work that you do. Normally I don't care about this, but I guess I always assumed that people expected lawyers to come in and sit in the boardroom, and when you're dealing with negotiations like that, there's a lot of value to being able to be right front and center with somebody. But do you find it difficult to be able to do your job now remotely, or is it just easier than ever? What are we
the transition hasn't been too bad, actually. There are times where it is really valuable to be in person, to be in a large boardroom or conference room, just to hammer out, especially when you're getting close to a closing, to kind of hammer out final negotiations. But ever since the financial crisis, that face-to-face is kind of receded. Part of that is just companies are looking to save money and they don't want to fly everybody out to New York City to a boardroom just to do something that can be done over the phone. So a lot of my practice leading up to COVID and the pandemic and lockdowns was over the phone. A lot of my clients were, international clients, and so we would never see them anyways. I had to build a relationship with them over email and over the phone, and the folks that I was negotiating against, the lawyers opposite me on the deal, a lot of them were out of, firm's New York office or London office, and so it was mostly over the phone. So I kind of joked when everything went remote that it wasn't that much of a change, because usually I would just go into the office and shut my door and crank out, whatever document I was working on. I think the one downside is more of, professional development. I lucked out that I was about a 7th year associate by the time lockdown happened. So, for the legal practice, a lot of it is mentorship, and you kind of learn by being in the room with the senior associates and the partners and kind of watching them do their thing. I think that would be hard as a junior associate coming into practice right now, not having that face-to-face and being able to, when you're scared because a partner just yelled at you, go talk to another associate in the office next door. But I kind of really lucked out being at the kind of level I was in, where I had already had that experience and that mentorship and guidance, that I was able to kind of, I think, although maybe my clients and partners disagree, seamlessly kind of transition to the remote side of things. Sure.
And let's see, so you're an associate attorney now, right?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And right. I guess for a layman like myself, what does that level look like? Is that associate is just before becoming a partner, or there's senior and then there's partner, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So usually at a firm, I don't know how it works outside of the corporate firms, but if you're practicing in corporate law, you kind of go to a firm, and it's about a 10-year track before you're up for partner, and you're an associate. And then, within the firm, you kind of talk about junior and mid-level and senior associate. So I'm at the senior associate level. So what that means is that I get a boss around the junior associates. And a senior associate, really kind of the role is, at least in deal world where I work, it's kind of playing quarterback essentially. So it's taking guidance from the partners who are more high level, and doing a lot of the drafting of the documents, maybe handling some of the negotiations, and then kind of pushing work down and to the junior associates, kind of some of the more grunt work that I did when I was a junior associate, and then kind of managing deal flow. So it's a lot of project management. So if it's a public company merger, especially, you've got a lot of lawyers on each side, upwards of 25 to 30 lawyers that are touching every merger agreement in some capacity. So the senior associate's role is kind of playing the quarterback and making sure that everything's moving along, hopefully expeditiously, but
you talk about like that, like there could be that many lawyers involved in a merger, right, or an acquisition like that. That's to someone like me who's really just never even dabbled in that world, but you just either like your only knowledge of it is either from hearing people talk about, having a friend who's in it, or seeing it on television, right? The first thing like a lay person like me would say is like, how in the world do you need that many people, right? Like, what in the world are they just like? First of all, I never should have been a creative. I should have figured out how to do that, because look, everyone just gets a payday. But help me understand, like, for like a layperson like that, like, why do you need that many lawyers on like a deal?
Yeah, so I mean, it varies on the size of the deal, right? So if it's a small tech company that's selling in its early stages, you wouldn't need that many. If it's a large international company that's selling, these companies are huge, and a acquisition could be a couple $1 billion to the tens of billions of dollars, and they may be financed by cash or by debt. So the short answer to your question is expertise. So there's these huge companies that have a lot of different aspects to them: employment issues, intellectual property. There may be some trade issues if it's a company based out of China. There's import-export restrictions, antitrust issues. So there's so many different practice areas and legislation, both in the United States and in all the jurisdictions in which the company has offices and operations, that need to be sorted out for the transaction to take place. And so no one lawyer has that much knowledge on that many different things. So you just have to bring everybody to the table and kind of make sure. And it's not as the deal lawyer, the corporate side, I don't know anything about, I know enough to be dangerous about tax or employment law, but you really need the experts to come in and tell me what I need to kind of be concerned about from the deal side.
Sure. And I mean, it's relating it to my work, right? As a producer, director, like, it makes total sense to me, right? Like, I know enough about everyone's role to ask some of the right questions, but I really like rely on like each individual person to be an expert in their own field.
Yeah,
I'm curious, as how that works from an attorney standpoint. I think about like when it comes to the medical industry or healthcare industry rather, how doctors will like have a chance to get into their specialty, and then at the very beginning, like through their residency and like whatever they get, like they're more or less like stuck in that like route and headed straight for it, and like that's you're not veering off and like learning multiple things. Like for an attorney, like is it for you guys, is it like, hey, whatever like senior associate or like partner I managed to like convince to let me like intern under, like that's what I'm going to learn how to do, and that's it? Like, or is there ability to become a specialist in multiple areas? Like, how does that work for you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's the age of being a generalist is kind of over in the legal field. At least that's kind of what I was told when I came up the ranks. Usually the way it happens, if you join a firm and do kind of go the private practice route, it varies from firm to firm, but when you first start, they'll kind of let you dabble a little bit in all the different practice groups and kind of get a sense of what you're interested in, and then if there's a need for an associate in that group. So usually it's not too hard to kind of find a niche that you may be interested in. But then, the risk is that, 2-3 years in, if you find out you want to switch it could be a little bit harder. I made that jump. I originally started in corporate reorganization, which is when a company goes under, restructuring their debts and kind of getting them through the bankruptcy process. And then about 2 years into my practice, I switched to mergers and acquisitions. And so it's doable, but you kind of you kind of need to prove that you're going to hit the ground running and make up for that lost time, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's not necessarily, even though it's great experience, it's not necessarily transferable, right? You're still like coming in kind of as a newbie, even though you got 3 years under your belt. Yeah.
But the law is always evolving and markets are changing. Like now every corporate lawyer I know is trying to turn themselves into a cryptocurrency expert. So, that's a fun part of the job, is that you kind of, as things change, you need to keep up with it. So you do kind of have to reinvent yourself and stay on top of things. So there is some flexibility there too.
I gotta ask, have you taken that leap into becoming a crypto lawyer? Is that an interest of yours?
It's, I find it fascinating, just conceptually, the whole concept of cryptocurrencies and, the legal space. It's kind of a wild west from a regulatory standpoint, because our regulations just haven't kept up with them, with the innovation that's happening. So, I've tried to start dabbling and purely just out of the interest in kind of the legal side of it, but I'd be lying if I said I understood the underlying technology.
I was gonna say
it's over my head.
Wouldn't necessarily be ready to be hired to litigate some crypto mess.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay, so, a big part of this podcast is to try to bring a couple of takeaways and tidbits, maybe some life hacks or some business hacks for our audience members. Now, being a corporate lawyer and knowing that a lot of the people that we've interviewed for this podcast have been entrepreneurs, business owners, or some level of exec, are there any tidbits of information from, I guess, a professional standpoint that you're willing to offer up, whether that be, these are some questions that you should ask, if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting to look for a lawyer to help you with a merger or acquisition, or hey, I've seen this happen before, just never let this happen. Or like, have you dealt with a lot of deals where it's like best friends are like splitting their company up and you're like, whatever you do, don't go into business with your best friend. Like, what can you give us from your years of experience as a corporate lawyer that you're willing to share with us?
Yeah. I think the first one that I run into a lot in the tech world, especially, is no one, especially when you're bootstrapping your company and you've got all sorts of expenses, the last thing you want to do is pay for a lawyer. And I get it. Legal expenses are they're not cheap. And, but I can't tell you how many times I've run into, the adage I always say is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It costs a lot more money to hire lawyers to fix a problem than it does to hire them to make sure you do things right in the first place. And you see that with tech companies a lot because, the tech world is moving fast and breaking things, and, it's super competitive, and they need to keep things going at a rapid clip. And, the last thing they're thinking about is making sure their corporate documents are up to snuff, or that, every document's signed, or that, they're complying 100% with X area of law. And then when it comes time to bring in some institutional money, whether it's from a venture capital firm or a private equity firm, or maybe they're being bought out by a competitor, that could take a lot of money off the table if their ducks aren't in a row, if they weren't doing things by the books. Because once the institutional money comes in, they're looking for any excuse to drop the asking price, right? So, I think there are ways to, find good counsel at whatever stage of a company you're at that meets your budget. And so that would be something I would say, make sure you've got your ducks in a row. And even though you may have to, bite the bullet and pay out some money to hire a lawyer earlier than you would want, it's probably worth it down the road if you're a company that's looking to grow and eventually sell or get an investment as part of your exit.
I think that's really helpful. I mean, the big takeaway is get a lawyer involved before it's too late. And I guess any suggestions on finding a lawyer or on choosing a lawyer? Like, I mean, most people like me would be like, I don't know, I get along with him. But like, he seems nice. He's not a total like douche to me, and that would be like a huge thing for me. But like, what would you say when someone's looking for it, or like if I came to you and I was like, Nico, like I need a lawyer to review my documents, and you're like, not me. I don't have time for you, Jesse. But then I'd be like, well, how do I find one? Like, what would you suggest to me?
Yeah, I think referrals, word of mouth is, there's a lot of lawyers out there. There's a lot of law firms, and it's really hard to differentiate between them, especially if you're not a lawyer and in the legal field. You don't know what firms are which and what practice areas which. So I always suggest, if you have a friend that's a lawyer and you're looking to hire a lawyer for whatever reason it is, talk to your friend, check your network and reach out. And, if it's, if you were coming to me with if you're hiring an employee and had an employment law question, I would tell you, I have no idea what to do about this, but I know 5 different employment lawyers. And I think that's usually your best bet because, for most lawyers, their bread and butter is their reputation, right? And so you'll be able to find a good lawyer based on whether or not, people are referring work to him or her. So I would reach out to your network and see who you know and go from there. Got it.
Okay. Well, hey, I think that's good advice. It's not advice I like hearing as an advertising exec, but I
should be better at pitching myself. Like, no, come to me. Like, I'm the lawyer you need.
Yeah. Well, hey, there you go. Like, if you're listening to this and you don't have a lawyer friend, you can reach out to Nico on LinkedIn and say, hey, I listened to that Faces of Our Cities podcast, and you and Jesse went to high school together, and Jesse is my connection on LinkedIn, but he's never talked to me before. Who should I use? And they should be able to trust you. There you go. Now they know that you're a trusted resource.
I got your
You'll
back.
Be like, okay, I need to start paying for this, getting paid for this. Like Jesse, just like divorce cases just start coming your way, and you're like, what? Why am I getting this?
I do not know maritime law, Jesse.
Yeah. Hey, that's a big deal down here, all right, in Houston, all right? I got one of those. I know one, all right? So we're good there. God, I hope I never actually have to deal with that. But anyway, well, Nico, thank you so much for taking time. I know I took a little bit extra of it, but thanks for that stroll down memory lane, and thanks for just letting your long locks of hair grace our presence for those who are listening and not watching this, Nico's picture on LinkedIn does not look anything like him. He is much more rad in person, and I can't wait till we get to actually like interact in person together. I think I might have to head out to Utah soon.
Yeah, come visit anytime. And no, thanks for having me. This was a real treat. Cool. It's always good reconnecting, and yeah.
You can find Nico on LinkedIn. His first name is spelled Niccolo. Last name is Barber. And reach out to him on there, and he might accept your friend or your connection request. Seems like the type that would. And if not, just mention that you met him through this podcast, and that should give you some street cred. So thanks again, and I can't wait to connect again in who knows how long. All right?
Likewise. Thanks, Jesse.